welcome everyone. My name's Anton Ophir-Kerr. I'm the Director of Equal International. We've got a team here that have been supporting a lot of this work, and Valley is controlling the slides for us. So this is the first of 3 launches of the global consultation on global public investment. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are, who are helping to facilitate the meeting, and also just to run through the agenda. So once I've done some introductions, we'll be going through the process that we've been through and sharing a summary of the co-creation of GPI, an overview of the consultation process, of which this is the launch of. We will hand over to Alicia Eliani, who's one of the expert working group members, who will facilitate a discussion with our panelists. And thank you so much to all our panel members who are made up of expert working group members and other champions who have been contributing to the thinking around GPI. And then we'll have a discussion. I think we'll have around 20-25 minutes left for a discussion. We aim to close and respect your time, so we'll close on time. Alicia will be doing some final comments, but we are going to keep the Zoom open for another half an hour at least for those that want to stay behind for virtual drinks. So that's the order of the day. We still are letting people in, but what I'm going to do is just start with a little introduction around who we are, Equal International. So we're a small consultancy group. We've been going for around 6 years now, and we provide expertise and support around essentially the program cycle, all the way from strategy through to technical support, through to learning campaigns, influencing, evaluations. And we also support work. Really, everything that we focus on is focused on those that are ensuring that no one is left behind, on equality and inclusion. And as part of that, we also, amongst our team, and our team are made up of associates that we bring together for different projects. We support a lot of thought leadership. So we've done some thought leadership, for example, around disability, around HIV, stigma and discrimination. And for about 4 years now, we've been supporting thought leadership on the future of ODA. Valley, the next slide for us. I just wanted to run through here a little bit of the journey that we've been on in as Equal and with colleagues of co-creation of GPI. And it started around 4 years ago when we were asked to help think through some of the challenges that many of the international development agencies are facing in relation to transitioning, which countries they can fund in and work in. As many countries go into upper middle income country status, they became ineligible for ODA. It outlined how the model of ODA isn't useful for our time. And so we started really the process of defining a problem through a thought leaders retreat, which we did around 3 years ago, that some of you, I think, on this call were at. And that led to, and you'll hear in a little bit more detail in Simon's presentation, the evolution of a solution, which was first articulated as 5 paradigm shifts. We supported a series of Wilton Park dialogues, as well as dialogues with different networks and organizations that we have access to and engage with. And then in October 2020, we convened an expert working group to see how we could take the GPI forward. And the expert working group was really brought together, and there's many members on this call, to help us think through how GPI can be technically feasible and politically viable. One of the key things that the expert working group members promoted was the idea of ongoing co-creation and consultation. And so we've taken time, whilst today we launched the report on progress of the expert working group that summarizes the thinking around GPI. And today we launch a consultation that Valley will be going through in some detail. There really is an opportunity for many organizations and sectors to feed in their thinking on the ongoing co-creation of GPI as hopefully a progressive policy solution for how the global challenges can be financed. And then finally, Valley, if you can give us the next slide, just to give you an overview of the expert working group who've come together, who have I think we've had around 4 or 5 meetings, the expert working group, and we've had a number of different subgroups to think through different elements of GPI. And really thank you to all the expert working group members, and especially the ones that have made today's launch, for all of your contributions. So with that introduction, if we can go to the next slide, I want to hand over to Simon to take it from here. Simon.
Thank you, Anton, so much, and thanks to all the EWG expert group members and panelists and friends of this process who've been with us along the journey so far that Anton's been describing. It's a massive privilege and pleasure to be able to, first of all, launch the result of that year-long process, just with the expert working group and the report that they've provided for us, but also to put this out now to a global consultation, which is something that I really think it's worth underscoring from the start is unique to the process that we're doing. To be able to bring in to the thinking behind a concept such as this, the views and opinions of people from around the world who have insights, but who often aren't able to have the voice in the systems that matter, I think is something really important, and I'm really proud that we've been able to bring this to fruition. The slide that you've got in front of you sets out just how different that is. It's a quote by Alan Kay. Some of you may be familiar with it. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. There are lots of other takes on this. You could say, people have often said, Edison didn't invent the light bulb by tinkering with the candle. It's the same kind of idea. GPI, global public investment, is something that's really unique. And hopefully we're going to give you a sense of that, although many of you I know are familiar with the basic principles behind it. And just really launching this into the world at a moment when it's so important we have something like this to pick up the tab from where we've been now at 1.5 years of COVID, and thinking forward to the next emergency, the climate emergency, and how we fund these essential global goods and commons and services that we all need to survive. Next slide, please. So the basics of global public investment, which I know many of you are familiar with, are really fundamentally contained within these 4 basic elements here. The idea, first of all, that all countries pay according to their ability, that the money that they raise is spent by geography and by theme, that there is regional distribution, but also global and local distribution, that all countries are actively involved and meaningfully involved in the decision-making, and that every country benefits from GPI, including rich countries. But not only rich countries, not only poor countries, but always rich and poor countries alike, countries and communities and regions according to need. So this is the essential element of global public investment. Next slide, please. And the way it's put together really comes out in the terminology. And it's one reason why the expert working group, though one of the tasks we gave them at the start was to consider the terminology, have decided to keep it. Because there in the frame, global public investment, you have essentially 3 elements that you need to know about. That this is global because it meets global cross-border objectives as well as national progress and national needs. That it is public, and that is the core element really, that it is accountable to all, it is directed by all. And finally, investment, that yes, it is about setting aside present consumption in order to ensure we have the resources available in future for the needs that are coming up further down the line, be those needs social, be they environmental, or be they also even economic. And these 3 elements are the core of GPI. Next slide, please. This one you may be more familiar with, and if any of you have been to our website, and if you haven't, please do go there, www.globalpublicinvestment.org. This is really the journey that we've been on in a thematic sense, crystallized. 5 fundamental paradigm shifts that we need to make in our thinking that actually many of us already are beginning to make. And when I say us, I mean international organizations, I mean activists, I mean NGOs, I mean even actually people working within national governmental sectors. These are the 5 changes that are beginning to be made that we need to continue making, that we need to push through. First of all, in ambition, that we move from a narrow focus on reducing poverty to meeting broader challenges of inequality and sustainability. Secondly, of function, that we move from seeing international public money as a temporary last resort to valuing it instead as a permanent force for good. Thirdly, that we apply this across different geographies, from a one-directional, north-south, donor-driven arrangement, which is the one that we've had for the last 70-odd years, to one that is 21st century appropriate, that involves all countries paying in and all benefiting according to need. Fourthly, in terms of the governance of that arrangement, that we move finally from an outdated post-colonial arrangement to one where we bring representative decision-making, meaningful voice into the international system. And fifthly, finally, the narrative that can carry all of these other changes, moving away from patronizing language of foreign aid into something that is much more empowering, that puts multilateralism back at the forefront of all of our futures. That's the transformation, finally, narrative that we need to bring all of these other elements together. And that's what we're here to hear more about in terms of this launch of the global consultation on GPI. Vali, next slide, please. So what's the vision behind this? That's what this slide really wants to get at. And essentially, again, our three elements: all benefit, all decide, all contribute. This is the core, this is the backbone of GPI throughout. But the vision for doing that, the reason for doing that, the reason for putting them together in particular institutional configurations is so that we can have a healthier, a fairer, and a more sustainable world, one that is anchored in global public finance and where all benefit, all decide, and all contribute. That's the aim, that's what we're trying to get to. And the particular concrete form of that vision, Vali, if you can take us to the next slide, thank you, is a post-2030 compact that is informed by and committed to the principles of global public investment. So the reason for having the expert working group, the reason for launching this consultation now is in order to begin to seed the debate so that by the time we get to deciding what comes after the Sustainable Development Goals, post-2030 agenda, GPI is something that is right at the heart of that discussion, because GPI is going to be needed if we're going to be able to realize the sorts of ambitions and the kind of challenges that we have to confront now as a global society, but also as national societies as part of that in the future. That's our ultimate ambition and our ultimate aim. And the work, thank you, Vali, of the expert working group in taking the next step towards that, in producing this document that actually sets out, and you can download it as part of the consultation, which Vali will say a little bit about in a few moments, is to have something that is technically feasible and politically attractive, because these are the two wings that we've got to secure. It's got to be something that can work, and it's got to be something that people can believe will work and that they will believe in, because we know that international solutions don't come about unless there is a groundswell of opinion and support for them. And that's why this report is really so important. And this is what it looks like if you download it. The expert working group on global public investment, the report in progress, it is already an enormous step forward in terms of thinking about global public investment and international public finance, but it's not the final word. The reason we want to have this global consultation is so that we can bring into that the views and the insights of experts and individuals from around the world to further consolidate our understanding and to further gain a sense of exactly what else needs to be done to improve this, to make sure that it really flies in the world in which we all live. And the report, when you do download it, breaks down into a series of, they're quite long sections, but they're hopefully quite simply explained. It's written in a language that everybody can understand. The basic elements that I've been talking about of what GPI comprises. First of all, a sense of why we back it. And then secondly, going through those three elements of how all will benefit, how all will decide, and how all will contribute, and actually laying out some concrete suggestions for how that will happen. Thanks, Vali. Next slide. And so this is why we back GPI, and this is what really the report ultimately comes around to saying, that it is something that will provide more money for us. It will provide not just any sort of new money, but public money, accountable money, and money that can be used, for example, to go into higher risk activities. You know, we didn't go to the moon on private finance. We went to the moon on public money because we could take that risk. That it is responsive to the kinds of international bottlenecks that we're already confronting and that you see in, for example, things like the COVAX system. That it is a compelling modern narrative that sounds new, that is new, because it has everybody around the table in producing that narrative. And that it responds, therefore, to the sorts of ambitions and challenges that we confront. And the ambitions part is key because, you know, with COVAX, with the climate emergencies, lots of things seem to be problems for us in the current age. We live in an era of crisis, many say, but we want to think big too. We want to be able to reach for the stars. We want to be able to solve problems that we haven't yet even dreamt of. And that's what GPI can enable us to do. Next slide, please, Vali. So in case all that is too detailed, and the report is quite long and hopefully comprehensive, and those of you that download it will I'm sure, have a chance to read and digest and offer your feedback. But there is a simpler version of the whole story, and that's what we've called GPI Numbers. It's another document. It's there on the website to be downloaded. And this slide really just gives you a basic sense of what that is and why. That it's one big idea. It's a central point. It doesn't mean there's only one way of doing GPI, but it is one central idea around which we can all get. Secondly, that it covers the generational challenge of a move from the 20th to the 21st centuries and the challenges and crises and opportunities that we confront today. Thirdly, that it deals in universals, by which we mean principles that can be enacted globally, principles of equality, of voice, and of contribution. There are 4 pillars to it, and this is often what we talk about when we're talking about GPI in shorthand, that it boils down to the 4 C's, as we call them, that everybody contributes, that everybody's commitment counts, that you have democratic control, and that it is co-created. And it's that 4th element that really has been something the expert working group have insisted upon throughout and have really developed and furthered our thinking upon. We've also managed to do, as Vali will describe in a second, some additional work around this that has, really given us a state-of-the-art take, I think, on what international co-creation is, and that is now being fed into this global consultation. Fifthly, that it revolves around the 5 evolutions, where we just talked a little bit about those. Number 6, that there are 6 reasons to back GPI. I mentioned those a few moments ago: more money, better money, public money, and so on. And then finally 7, that there are 7 ways to engage. That's the bit we want you to take on for us. You can reply to the consultation directly in free text. You can convene groups. You can amplify the message. You can promote the message within your own organizations. You can pilot it even. And we've begun to think about how GPI can be piloted within the context of certain multilaterals already, that you can fund further work within this area, and finally, that you can partner with us on the next stage. And we really hope that out of these 7 ways to engage, you'll find at least a few of them that work for you, and we really want to hear from you in that process. Next slide, please. Vali, this is where you're going to take over and tell us how the consultation, which kicks off today, is actually going to work and going to bring those 7 ways of engaging to all of you. So thanks, Vali.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. And thank you, everybody. Just moving swiftly and smoothly from the presentation from Simon. This slide is really is a core slide for our work on the global consultation and in GPI in general, because it really kind of sums up, it almost kind of projects what the work of GPI so far has been through what we found in the research, that the best practice in co-creation, that you've done the co-design, the looking at the problem, and you're coming up with a solution as GPI with its core principles there. And then now, this moment, we want to expand. We want to have the legitimacy of the proposition that came from the expert working group on GPI to do this global consultation and hear from a wider audience to ensure the legitimacy of the proposition. And then hopefully with the outcomes of the consultation, we'll come up with some concrete things to work on to co-produce how it will be implemented, how it will work out in different sectors, different organizations in different regions, and then maintaining the dynamic and organic process of co-creation. Another consultation maybe could follow to make sure that the implementation even is grounded in reality, and we always hear the voices in the process of co-creation, and ensuring the transparency and accountability are there at all times. So with this in mind, and really with aiming for inclusiveness and representation in this global consultation, we've got 3 launches. This is the first one. So that's Americas, Africa, and Europe. Next week on Wednesday, we will have 2 on the same day, different time zones. We will cover Asia, Africa, and Europe. And the third one is for Latin America and the Caribbean. And that third one is in Spanish. Information about this is all on the website. There's a consultation page within the Global Public Investment webpage. So you'll find a lot of information about that. So what are we consulting? What are we doing here for the global consultation? We've got the key questions here. We, as Simon said earlier, we want to hear your insights. We want to hear it from you as individuals, as organizations, how to improve that proposition of GPI. And then we want also to take this opportunity to expand the engagement and the outreach, again, to work on the legitimacy of the proposition to the wider audience, to reach a wide audience there. Who are we consulting? It's a long list here. We're sending it to a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals, and we would welcome you and urge you to send it on within your networks and within your constituents to hear as many voices as possible. What we're consulting, I'll talk more about this, but these are the 5 areas: the need for GPI, improving the proposition, the actual core principles in specific, and then the reality of GPI later on, and your specific engagement. On the how, we've got 3 very focused tools and methods: SurveyMonkey, the roundtables, and some interviews. And you've got the key dates here: the starting date, the end date of the SurveyMonkey, 20th of October, and then the launch will be in December. So how we would like you to engage. This is really the key of the consultation process. First and foremost, we really would like you to read the 2 documents. They are on the website, and the top one, the expert working group, is the more comprehensive document and the report. And then the one that Simon was mentioning earlier, the GPI in Numbers, is easily read and easily accessible document to have a look at and to read through. All the information is on the website. How do you engage? In three ways we would like you to engage with the process. 1, go directly to the SurveyMonkey. There's a link there on the website, on the consultation page there, and respond. Here we're giving the options, either as an individual, just put your answer straight away, or if you want to collate some answers, either from your team, your department, your organization, whatever configuration, to present a consolidated response versus an individual response. So you have that option as well using the SurveyMonkey. The second way of engaging is the roundtable discussions. And again, here there are 2 ways of engaging. 1, there are roundtables that will be organized by the consultation team, and I'll show that in a minute. And then, but the other one, we would like to encourage you to self-organize roundtables. And there are information on the website, again, to guide you a little bit more if you need to for the managing the roundtables in your own organizations, in your own sector, in whatever formation that you feel you would like to engage with. And the third one, if you feel like doing a one-to-one interview with some colleagues, heads of department, heads of organizations, other stakeholders, and again, use the SurveyMonkey as the guide for you. These are the 5 areas and the 5 questions. The need for GPI. How could it address the core global local challenges from your perspective? The second one, what it proposes. Give us your perspective and insights on how to improve the proposition, specifically, and in what areas. The core principles, the 3 principles, really zooming in, and give us your opinion and your take on those 3 universals, making it a reality, a little bit more meaty here. What do you think the necessary steps to actually implementing? What can be done in the short and medium term in order to use the GPI principles? And where do you think where we could have the biggest impact? So really leading on that next loop of co-creation, which is the nuts and bolts of GPI. And finally, your engagement, there will be a drop down of those 7 ways of engagement, as Simon mentioned earlier. And then we added another. So please feel free to add your own other engagement way with the GPI broadly. This is the organized roundtable discussions. So again, ensuring under the umbrella of co-creation, the legitimacy and inclusiveness, we've got those 5 regions: the Latin America, in Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. And we've got leads for all, 1 to be confirmed in North America. It will be the preparation for those organized. They will probably 2 or 3 maximum happening over the next few weeks. And then in September, that's when they will actually take place. Bring it all close together. This is the engaging of GPI beyond the consultation. So the first 2 refer to the consultation, and then the rest, I'm not going to go through them again. That's what Simon has been over that earlier, is beyond the consultation, how you would engage with GPI for later stages. So that's what we are with the consultation. We really look forward to your active engagement. Everything is put there on the website. Please visit the website and visit the consultation page. All the documents are there to download, and the Survey Monkey is there as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vali. Thank you so much, Simon, for summarizing such a huge amount of comprehensive work in a short presentation. It's my pleasure to hand over to Alicia Eliyamin from Partners in Health. Alicia is a member of the expert working group and has been a huge champion and support of our work and our thinking. Alicia is going to oversee our panel discussion. So over to you, Alicia.
Thanks very much, Anton. And it's really thrilling to hear the presentations that Simon did and Vali did, and to know that we're at this point. And just to re-emphasize something that has come out a few times, but this is the launch of something. This is not the finish. We are launching a report on progress, and we want to incubate this idea, to be taken and disseminated widely and shared and improved. So I'm delighted to introduce a panel of eminent speakers from different perspectives to share their views on why global public investment is needed right now. I'll turn first to board Vegar Solhjeil, who's the Director General of the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, Norad. Board.
Thank you. Great to be with you here today. I'm joining you on a fantastic Nordic summer day. I've sent off my kids fishing, so I can be able to spend some time with you this afternoon here in Norway, at least. My name is Vegar Solhjeil. Like you said, I'm the Director General of Norad. Norad is the Norwegian Development Cooperation Agency. We manage approximately half of all Norwegian grants. Like you will know, Norway is one of very few countries spending more than 1% of our gross domestic income on development cooperation. I'll take you very briefly through the 3 simple reasons why we were so impressed and interested when we heard about this initiative and when we are working with it and following it so closely. We discovered that our grants and how we spent it have already become quite global. More than 22% of the total ODA from Norway is what we would categorize as global public goods. So our development work have already turned from, being from donor to a receiving country. Quite a lot of it is part of an increasing global effort, and this number has been growing. Most of it is climate or health, but it's also research and other things. So we are already going in that direction. We wanted to understand this better and to create a discussion around it. And second, we have definitely seen the need to support and to emphasize the role of public funding more. Just look at what's happening now. Public funding globally is more robust than private funding. Foreign direct investment was down 42% last year. ODA was up, not a lot, but still a little bit. And we see the same now happening internationally, as we have seen in each nation state. Without a strong public basis, you can't build real growth. And to me, public is also about making institutions for that public money, not to exclude the private, of course, but you have it as a basis. And thirdly, investing. we have started using that term to ourselves also, to think about development, cooperation, and aid not as a gift but as an investment. And we're also using it to build a bridge between self-interest, spending money on ourselves, and what many people in the national polity see as, as just donating money to someone else. And this is to enlighten some kind of, to what we will call an enlightened self-interest, right? That some things are in our interest, but we are also investing in the same thing, which is in other people's interest. That's what we're doing, fighting a global pandemic, fighting climate change, biodiversity loss, or building a research and knowledge base globally. So what's in a name? Well, global public investment is a name that immediately catches the main issues we are concerned about. We'll be with this also in the future to discuss, to understand, to be part of the formation. And I think that the key term for the process ahead of us is co-creation. We don't know exactly where we're headed. That's how change works. We don't know exactly how things are going to be, but the process is actually part of creating that. And this type of process becomes better if more ideas, more ways of seeing it are involved. And I think you've done an amazing job clarifying concepts, making proposals. Now we need more people to invest in this change of what global cooperation can be for the next century. Good luck further on. I'll be with you for the rest of the conversation here.
Well, thank you so much, Vegar, for taking time away from a beautiful Norwegian day, and also for those remarks and the emphasis on the need for public institutions that are accountable to citizens in their home countries, and also for the actions of their home countries abroad, and the emphasis on co-creation. Let me turn now to Jean-Paul Adam, Director for Technology, Climate Change, and Natural Resources Management in UNECA.
Yes, good afternoon from Addis Ababa. If I can just check that you can hear me well. Unfortunately, my camera is not working because of a problem with my Wi-Fi connection, and I'm connected from my phone. I just wanted to make sure you can hear me.
We can, and we can hear you well.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for bearing with me. And I'm delighted to be able to join this extremely important conversation around global public investment, because the COVID-19 pandemic has underlined and emphasized, perhaps more than any previous event, the fact that we must tackle these development challenges in a more coherent and coordinated manner, and that results can only be achieved if there is appropriate coordination among countries. Climate change is another area which has indicated the challenges that will come about if we are focused purely on only national priorities in terms of investment, or if we are looking only at donors' priorities in terms of investment, rather than defining in a more objective manner the ways in which we could prioritize funding into areas that will have the most impact in building climate resilience, for example. Now, the current global approach towards investment and in development is unfortunately linked to global gross national income per capita. And this is an absolutely artificial measure of progress, because it essentially means taking the overall wealth of a country and then dividing it by the number of citizens. And you have a lot of inaccuracies that are created by these kind of methodologies. You have small countries that often have disproportionately large GNI per capita because of the impact of the richer categories in those populations have a bigger distortion impact. And it also means that in very large countries, you do have people who often are even not properly captured and marginalized. And this is one of the biggest issues that we're seeing currently in Africa. Africa is still the continent that has the largest share of low-income countries, but it is a dramatic change from where we were a few years ago, where the majority of African countries are now actually middle income. And that has a dramatic impact, for example, on the access to resources. But the problem is that the overall number of people who have been taken out of poverty has actually not increased. The percentage of people living in poverty has reduced, but the overall number of people living in poverty is actually higher. And this is an area of great concern, particularly that the criteria for poverty is actually extremely low. And the graduation rate from low-income country status is actually $1,230 per capita per annum. And this is obviously a very low rate and does not properly address the needs for investment in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and certainly in terms of achieving climate resilience. So moving towards global public investment criteria would allow us to make better use of the very scarce resources that are available globally and investing them where they will have the most impact. The most obvious would be, of course, in health and education, which there are many proven areas of investment that bring dramatic impacts in terms of the progress that brings about in terms of development indicators. On top of that, I think we have to recognize there would be some regional differences. Work that the UNECA has done recently in Africa on a green recovery and an analysis that we published earlier this year showed that in Africa, the most impact in terms of jobs, the high value jobs that would be created and the gross value addition within the economy would essentially be focused around three sectors. And those would be energy, would be food security and climate smart agriculture. And thirdly, around nature-based solutions. And that means essentially where you're rehabilitating the natural environment in a way which creates employment. And examples would be things like agroforestry or the rehabilitation of mangroves, where you create jobs quickly that are associated with the protection of the natural resource and which therefore create jobs, but also rehabilitate that natural resource in the process. So those are the areas that emerged from our study. And moving towards a global public investment system would allow us to better use the limited resources that are available under public funds globally to have the most impact. And I think there would be a recognition of certain regional differentiation that has to be taken into context. The final point that I will make is that we also need to recognize that we need to dramatically increase the global public finance that is available for investment in development and particularly in climate resilience. And that's part of the solution as well to building resilience against future pandemics. But we have to recognize as well that the scale of investment required will also mean crowding in the private sector. And this is where global public investment principles can set a very clear signal as well for future private sector investment. And this is particularly useful in a number of areas such as energy, where we can see that public investment needs to be focused particularly in countries that may have very low access rates currently, but also in improving grids and addressing the overall regulatory frameworks. But in Africa, we've calculated that you need $500 billion over the next 10 years just to achieve full energy access and to allow Africa to achieve sustainable industrialization. So to reach those levels of investment will involve crowding in the private sector. And we think that global public investment strategies can help to provide the right signaling and align investment as well from the private sector with those priorities that could be identified through a GPI process. So thanks so much for letting me share a few of these perspectives, and we look forward to the continuation of the discussion. And I apologize that my camera is not available at the moment.
Thanks very much, Jean-Paul. I think you brought a few really important points to the table. One are the regional differences. Two is the better money point, which Simon had also raised, but you gave very concrete examples. And a third really important aspect of GPI is the temporal forward-looking aspect of it. Aid is crisis-driven and to deal with problems that have happened in the past or are happening now. But GPI lends itself to thinking ahead into the future in investment. So we've heard now from a government development agency and from the UN Economic Commission in Africa, and we're going to turn to Civicus. Can I turn to you, Glada Bosko, who is the Senior Advisor on Civil Society at the Civicus Global Civil Society Alliance. Glada.
Thanks, Alicia. Can you hear me? Well, yeah. All right. So thank you so much, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. It's really exciting as having been part of the expert working group to see us getting to this point. And I'd like to share from our observation point from an alliance of civil society why we think that the GPI is something important, and it's something that it's worth supporting and considering as a model, as an option. Well, first and foremost, it's much needed. It's a compelling concept and fit for the 21st century. And then the co-creation approach that has embraced feels the only way, at least for me, the only way that one can really think of a transformative process. It's much needed because we need new practices of democratic and inclusive multilateralism. Multilateralism as it is now, it's in retreat. International bodies are being jeopardized by state actors who've been withdrawing from mechanisms, not respecting international treaties, but has also been very much criticized by citizens who found them undemocratic, non-transparent, unaccountable. And so there is really the need to reimagine a more democratic and inclusive multilateralism and to reunite multilateralism and international cooperation. And what we like about this concept is really the arguments that are made about how much we need more and not less of international cooperation, but done in a different way. And the other reason why we need this is also because if we think of the priorities of the big challenges that we have ahead of us, and also as global civil society, we're trying to mobilize around, and the ambitions that we have for addressing soaring levels of inequality, the climate crisis, and more equitable access to public health, just to give you 3 examples. They are mentioned in the report. We also need to think of the financial infrastructure that can support the types of investments, and that's exactly the right concept, and that's also why we, and others have mentioned, why we think it's the right one. Investments in long-term and reliable flows of funding and investments, in fact, in the capital and the infrastructure and in the goods that are required to meet those ambitions. And we also like very much the case that was made about the need for global public finance as one of the ways through which financing the meeting of these goals, but making the case that there are specific characteristics for which we need also to invest more and to cherish more for global public finance. The reasons why we think it's a very compelling case, or at least I think very compelling case and fit for this century, have very much to do with the 3 universal aspects that are sort of characterizing this concept. The all benefit, all decide, all contribute is a very, very important notion. The 5 evolution in the proposed approach that Simon presented feel absolutely the only way to go, the only way to overcome the current outdated colonial, extractivist and dysfunctional system. And particularly for us, what is important is the element on fairness and inclusivity of state and non-state actors, and amongst them, civil society is acknowledged as a key actor that should be involved in decision-making processes that embedded in GPI. So I personally like very much the ambition of recipient ownership and power sharing, which are also some of the elements that have been presented earlier. And it has to do with what others said about it's not just the amount of money that one raises and one spends. It's also the quality. It's how these priorities are set, who gets to decide, how can we really share power in those decisions? How can we be inclusive and really inclusive? How can we be accountable and transparent? And so, more involvement of non-state actors, more diversity of the type of non-state actors that we will be able to meaningfully engage will definitely allow us to reach a more democratic, responsive, and effective mechanism. And then lastly is the co-creation approach. I mean, nothing like this could work by having a group of experts coming up with a report after having met a couple of times. It sounds like a very outdated approach. It would have sounded like a very outdated, ineffective approach, the typical top-down technical fix, and that's it. This is really not the way to go, definitely not for me and not for us. We need really collective action, collective engagement to really understand together and collectively from the different vantage points across disciplines, across geographies, across movements, what is that would make this framework valid, compelling for everyone. And therefore, and then I'll close, as Simon was mentioning, how can we then make sure that it's politically attractive? How can we really signal to decision makers and politicians that there is traction, that there is an alignment? And I'll just end by saying that this leads me to why we always felt that a consultation phase in this phase of the co-creation process was key, because we really need to make sure that we're on the right direction of travel. We really want to hear different voices from their different vantage points on what's missing, what's not so compelling, how can we make it more relevant for people, how can we make even a stronger case, what are the things we have not considered. And I just wanted to say that from every expert working group member, there is a serious interest in listening and understanding. This is not a tick-the-box consultation. And so I would really like to invite everyone to consider engaging in the various ways that Vali explained. Maybe there are also even other creative ways you could think of, but there is a serious intention from our end to really engage in conversation and understanding and listening from you about how to make this even more strong and compelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Cleta. I think you eloquently mirrored the degrading nature of our current aid system that doesn't consult people about the policies that will affect their lives, and the need not to replicate that in ideas moving forward, and that we really do mean it when we say co-creation. I want to turn now to Dapo Oyawali, who is now the special advisor to the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Nigeria, but previously worked for the Minister of Finance and on international development and cooperation. Dapo?
Thank you very much, moderator Alicia, and thank you to all our colleagues who have joined us, and of course all the participants. Let me start by saying a very big thank you to the expert working group, and of course equality. My good friend Jonathan Glen, who I work with on a different project called the Dignity Collective, but which of course has strong connections with why we're gathered here today. Before I commence, one important caveat I should make is I am not speaking in my personal capacity. I am not speaking on behalf of the Nigerian government or any government whatsoever. Perspective of having had the privilege and opportunity to work in this sector over the past 20 years as a tri-sector leader. First, like you mentioned earlier on, working as an advisor to government ministers, particularly looking at issues of development, development policy and international cooperation, looking at it from the private sector perspective, particularly in international development consulting at McKinsey, at Palladium, and also from civil society as a local Center for Democracy and Development. The reason why I mentioned these three groups is that I actually think these are three critical groups, stakeholder groups that are both involved in the structuring of the current aid architecture, but also who are fundamental in shifting it. So my perspective that I want to share today is that we're looking at the same issue, but from, shall I say, three different lenses. But they all converge in a set of very clear ideas which I'm about to put on the table. The first thing I would say, and I think my previous speakers have underscored this as well, is that if aid or the international aid system were an emperor, I think COVID-19 has decisively told us that this emperor, the whole idea of having an international aid system is not just to react to one-off humanitarian disasters and emergencies, but it's about having, shall I say, an insurance system where we know that when we face pandemics, when we face challenges, collective common challenges like we've just seen with COVID-19, we have a system in place that allows us to be able to tackle it equally and collectively. And we've seen very clearly that that did not happen. Well, that is not a surprise to any of us in the industry, because for the past 70 years or so since the Marshall Plan, the same issues have been recurrent, recalcitrant challenges about the impact of the current aid system, the ideology driving that system, the issues of ownership, transparency, the power dynamics around it, and a fundamental one, which I would call intellectual exclusion, where the heads of the people from the developing regions are shaved in their absence. In a sense, development has been done to people and people have not been involved and carried along in that development journey. So I think if I were to put it more poetically, I can say it's not always bent towards justice. It hasn't bent towards equity, and nor has it bent towards dignity. And we've also seen some, shall I say, political tectonic plates that have shifted in the international system that have further weakened the global, shall I say, global systems of global governance through which aid itself has been managed. Recently, we saw the United Kingdom cut its aid budget. The United Kingdom has been one of the champions and set the best practices for aid management and international development practice thus far. With that, with the UK pulling back in that responsibility, and of course with the, shall I say, the fallouts of the last American administration, where we saw a lot of unilateralist and protectionist approaches, then we see that even the machinery, the conveyor belt of aid itself is broken. So I think it's needless to say that we have a huge challenge on our hands, and I have the privilege of heading the COVID-19 response strategy team and the office of the speaker. And to be honest with you, that was when it became clearest that the aid system perhaps has been preparing or respond to the past, but it has not been equipped to respond inclusively and effectively to the current challenges or even those that are to come in the future. And this particularly is why I am very excited about GPI, because it gives us a potential answer to some of the questions that we've been asking since the Marshall Plan about how do we have an aid system that is effective, inclusive, transparent, respectful, and also equitable. And I think one key takeaway that I to simplify the beauty of what is proposed by the GPI are the four fundamental pillars on which I think fundamental pillars actually address some of those recalcitrant challenges that I mentioned earlier on. So first, about contributions. You know, the whole aid, one of the key things that have skewed the power dynamics in the aid debate is about, well, you know, the donor brings the money, so the beneficiary just keeps quiet and takes what they get. And this gives us an opportunity to change that because of the approach of having an all contributions on a fair share based system. I think that is important. Every country should have a skin in the game, gives them a greater right to be able to demand what actually happens in the aid in the donor sphere, so to speak. The second is about commitment, and I think this is absolutely critical. Critical in the sense that we've seen a scenario whereby it's almost like you're fueling an aeroplane just for the journey and not for the landing. And what has happened with quite a number of speakers, I mean, of initiatives, is that aid funds have been injected, but unfortunately, it has not been sustained. I think this idea about commitment enables us to have a framework that enables donors and practitioners to be able to ensure that the aid and all that comes with it is sustained and maintained on a longer term to allow recipient countries not only to soar, but also to land at the airport of development. The third is around control, which is absolutely critical. We've seen just in the past 10 years, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matters movement, and myself and my colleagues have been working on this concept of dignity development. The reality continue the way in which we have, because the reality also is that it's been unfair and it's been discriminatory. And I think this approach of having control, of having a practical, accountable and inclusive system where the stakeholders are not just from the donor-giving countries, the beneficiaries are part of the discussion, part of the approach, and also part of delivering. I think this gives us an opportunity to have a more, shall I say, equitable balance in this co-creation, which connects with control. The reality, my position in the work that I've done, is where you see donors who come and say, we want to tell you how we're going to help you, but they don't ask, how do you want to be helped? It's very much like going to the hospital and the doctor not asking you what is wrong. And this co-creation approach, I think, fundamentally will be very, very important in helping countries help themselves with their home-based solutions as well. And I think I'll end on that note to say that I think that in the range of different initiatives that have come up against the many criticisms in the international aid system, I think GPI offers us one of the most innovative and one of the most dynamic and responsive approaches thus far. There's a whole lot more work to be done. I believe for political viability, a lot more advocacy needs to be done. And it's important to emphasize not just focusing on the executive arm of government, but also on the legislative arm of government, because if you get the laws right, then it's easier to hold government and other stakeholders accountable. And then I also believe that it's important fundamental issue, which is that there is a trust deficit in the aid system. The donors don't trust the recipients don't trust the donors, and the different actors amongst themselves also don't trust themselves. And I think this is a result of broken promises in the past, as well as even ulterior motives and very questionable practices. So even as we are introducing GPI, I think we should be thinking about it in holistic sense that addresses the challenges of not just the hardware of the international aid system, but also the software of the international aid system. I congratulate all who have worked on it, and I look forward to us working together to build this into a veritable tool for a better international aid system that delivers not just for some, but delivers for all in an equitable, inclusive, and respectful manner. I thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dapo. I think you put very clearly the charade that global solidarity has turned out to be in this COVID pandemic. I'm going to turn quickly, because we're starting to run out of time, to Madiso Ndlovu, who's the Executive Vice President of the African Center for Economic Transformation. Mavis?
Thank you very much, Alicia. I will try to be as brief as possible. So firstly, it's a great pleasure and honor to be here today and to join this, the launch of the consultation of this critical vision. I would like to see it as a vision that we are working towards. And the reason this vision and getting your views on the vision is critical is for a number of reasons. In sub-Saharan Africa, a number of governments have been talking about the fact that the current international aid architecture is not working for them, and looking at how do African governments pull their own resources to contribute to better development. There's a long way to go, but those conversations has been initiated. When the Sustainable Development Goals were set up, they were set up with a perception that poverty and need exists everywhere, and it must be improved and measured everywhere. Somehow, in the implementation, it has become very much a problem for developing countries. Is it because the financing architecture doesn't work, or is it because anything that is not great or negative comes from a developing country? It's not clear, but the SDG architect saw the importance of a financing structure and a development framework that captured all poor people everywhere. COVID-19, I think it was Dapo that says that COVID-19 has shown that our international aid architecture is the emperor with no clothes, which made me smile when he said that. But COVID-19 for me has raised a number of fundamental issues. It's shown the power and influence that a handful of countries have over our current international aid architecture. And if those countries are adopting nationalistic positions, the impact it has on the rest of the world. We saw that when it came to the financing agreement, when countries desperately needed liquidity and were not able to shift the IMF or the World Bank because they were held hostage by a couple of other countries. Recently, we are seeing the challenges aligned with vaccine nationalism, and we're beginning to see countries in Africa scrambling to produce its own vaccines because the whole concept of a global system suddenly became a whole concept of me first and then I think global. So we were not thinking local, we became local then global, which was a fundamental challenge. So why are we interested in the global the global public investment? The reason we are interested in it is really twofold. One, we at the best brains in the world are telling us that this crisis is the first of many that is ahead of us. If our international aid architecture is not fit for purpose, this is the time for us to be looking at an instrument that is fit for purpose. Everybody in the world is asking for an instrument where they have a stake in, have a voice in, and can be held to account for. There is a mutual accountability structure being explored as part of the GPI. And, if there's a mutual accountability, there has to be a mutual system of naming and faming and naming and shaming as well, and penalization systems in there when countries are not honoring their commitment to their poor people and investing in the right public investment. So this is why I, as an individual, am interested in it. And this is why I have encouraged ASSET to participate in the consultation process. So all things being equal, we will be working with the team to support African consultations at the national government and business level, and to an extent, bringing in civil society through our think tank partners. And why are we participating in this? This is a conversation that has happened in Africa before, and it did not go as far as we had hoped it would from an AU perspective. This time, we think we need to go to the table when the idea is still under development to ensure that we can really thrash out areas of disagreement, areas of tensions, areas of conflict, and come up with a model that works for everybody. There will be winners and losers, but we want to ensure that the losers lose out less and the winners win enough to balance it for everybody. So that is what ASSET hopes to do to contribute to this process. Our call to action from an African perspective, our young people are growing and they are fed up with a world that isn't working with them, and they are asking and fighting for it from every country. The global aid architecture can contribute tremendously to answering and helping to address the concerns of our young people. So come together and help us hear their voices and pull together an instrument that is fit for the 21st century. Thank you very much, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Mavis. One of the exciting things about GPI, about the expert working group, and about the concept is bringing together universal aspirations of dignity and equality and equity with the understanding of the infrastructure that needs to provide it. And I think you see that in the interdisciplinary nature of the expert working group, but also in the kinds of inputs we're looking for in the consultation. So our last speaker is Solhjeil Baptiste, who's the Executive Director of the International Treatment Preparedness Coalition. Solhjeil.
Hi, thank you, Alicia. Thank you for inviting ITPC and as a member of the expert working group to make a contribution. Going last is rough because everybody said everything already. So I'm going to try not to repeat anything, but also just give a slightly different perspective. So ITPC sits at the intersection of health and politics, and we have been fighting for access to life-saving medicines and diagnostics now, starting with HIV, from almost over 17 years. So I bring a perspective of affected people to the table, communities, and civil society in the simplest of terms. I'm also speaking as one who knows very well what it means to be at the mercy of grants and at the mercy of aid. And to be honest, there's an aspect of what I do that I often describe as a glorified beggar. Goodness, because it's really because of the power dynamics of traditional aid can be so oppressive and challenging. It makes you just feel like that's all you're doing. And to be honest, the first time I heard Jonathan Glennie, I remember exactly where I was sitting speaking about GPI, I laughed and I thought, who is this nut who thinks this could ever work? But then I grew to love the idea and grew to love him too. And grew to love the idea because it was crazy, because it was radical, and because it was right. So I'm really talking as one who is converted. Look, the system doesn't work for everyone. The system only really works for some, and all of the incentives in place are to keep it that way. And as everyone said, we have a moment in history now, nothing like a non-discriminating virus to remind us how artificial our boundaries are, and more importantly, how interconnected we are. But we saw that even in the face of all of this, we saw our true global colors, right? We saw backdoor deals, we saw hoarding, and at the root of it, self-interest. So we have to change the system to a better reimagined playbook, which is better for everyone. And this is exactly what I love about the GPI approach. It's resetting the table for everyone and moving towards equality. I'm excited about the consultation process because we get to hear a vast array of perspectives and co-create. And I think back to Vali's slide, right? And I saw there was also a question in the chat, like, what is this co-creation we're talking about? So it's not just, let me consult you with my preconceived notions and then move on. It's really about co-designing and consulting and co-producing. And we can't ask for something different if we build it the exact same way. So I think what we are doing now is really walking the talk. We need to hear from everyone, non-conventional partners at the table, not one where our voice is equal and our influence is equal to how deep our pockets are, right? Take that from an individual level to country level to regional level. The consultation is deliberately designed for meaningful and full engagement and creation methods that flip the status quo on its head. And I just want to make this point, I sound like a broken record, but governments are not always a proxy for their people. We need to hear from people from themselves. We don't want always someone speaking on their behalf. And we need to get input from the people on the priorities, the methods, the governance, the accountability, especially around global health security, which is what we're sitting in together. So ITPC will be participating by tapping into its global activist network to get the view and input of regular folks, particularly in the health justice sector, about how this can work in a very concrete way. So I'm very excited about the future in the face of the growing crisis all around. It's ripe with opportunity, if only we can seize it. Thank you.
Thanks, Solange, and thanks for being brief. I think in the spirit of this co-creation, I will forego my own remarks for now and invite other people who are participating to jump in and ask questions and make observations. And I'll just close with some remarks on behalf of Partners in Health at the end.
Thanks, Alicia. That was a fantastic set of interventions from our speakers, a huge amount of wisdom and insight. We have got almost 15 minutes because we want to allow 5 minutes at the end for Alicia to wrap up. And that's a huge amount of topics that were covered. So please feel free to raise your hand. I'm sure there's lots of questions there, comments that you'd like to share. Let's utilize the 15 minutes that we've got left for a discussion. And once we close, remember that those that would like to stay on longer, we'll carry on the discussion after. So Francisco, great to see your hand up. Can I come to you and then I'll come to Moga? And please keep your interventions and questions short so we can get as many people to have an opportunity to speak as possible. Francisco.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be brief, and thank you to everyone. Nice to see several colleagues here, and congratulations to the starters from this process, which was seemed to be a difficult one. Today we've got a report. We're expanding the consultation. My intervention is regarding what was said by the last three speakers, is the reaching out to this process. The key word here is this co-creation. The co-creation is to lead up to the buy-in process right from the beginning. If I try to draw an analogy with the HIV and AIDS movement, it moved forward because it was a very strong buying in from the grassroots, from the countries bottom up. So we need to do the same thing here. I realized that we have only 93 or 92 people participating. I was going through the list. I cannot claim to know all the names, but I noticed that a very lack or insufficient participation from Africa, and today was the day devoted to Africa. We might need to explore additional networks to make sure that we reach out to the key people in the different parts of the country, so that we get a massive process that everyone understands everything from the beginning, so that we can build this bottom-up process of buying into it and push things forward. If it was not due to this buying into, we could not have had the Global Fund. Initially, we wanted the Global Fund for health. At the end, we got it for HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, but it's good that we expanded it to tuberculosis and malaria and not HIV alone. So that experience is quite teaching. That's my proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco, for that intervention and keeping it short. Moga, over to you.
Okay, thanks. Just to say that there's two things to kind of warn about. So one thing I love about this, of course, is that the idea of sharing power. So it's not donor recipients, it's sharing power. That is really, really critical, because my worry is to see this as increasing domestic financing, so donors walk out of it. So not walk out, but anyway, cut their funding one way or another, like what the UK is doing. So that's just one thing. This is not about we pay more as developing countries, is about we sharing the decision making. And the COVID thing is a prime example where, to me anyway, I may be wrong, but that's personal. I feel like a private northern club created the Act A, including COVAX, and they decided they know what is best for these guys over there. And therefore, you know, to have 2% of Africans only are vaccinated. This is just an absolute scandal, absolute scandal. So, but if you want to share power and share decision making and share money, you have to be committed. So our, I mean, which is like what Francesco was talking about, commitment. So our countries have to have this, have to prioritize financing and the whole thing of funding and putting ahead social service, health, education, gender equity, and climate. That has to be top priority, even before security. If that happens, then we will have real co-sharing. Because don't forget, after the SDGs, we had the Financing for Development Conference in Addis Ababa, and it was just like the normal thing, you guys increase funding and, you know, we'll give you loans to increase funding for health. It was at the time. Give you loans to increase funding. So increase your debt. And the private sector will put trillions of dollars. Of course they would, and why should they? Anyway, so that's turning it upside down.
Thank you, Moga. Stefan.
Yes, thank you so much, and good evening and good afternoon. First of all, let me congratulate to the entire team for this achievement. I mean, this is great. I think the orientation, the vision to think about a new narrative, new strategies, new modalities is so important. Let me just pick up a few, let's say, rather technical questions, which might be quite important. And I'm struggling a bit with those technical questions because I'm a bit afraid that we might repeat some traditional failures of aid. And looking at some core elements of GPI, I have really some questions. First of all, when we are talking about investments, why is it just investments? Looking at the literature about global public goods, this is also about non-financial contributions. Yeah, looking, for example, at many developing countries contributing to blue helmet missions. Those are not financial contributions. Why is it not part of this thinking? The second aspect, grants. I mean, this is very much, I would say, if we just focus on this aspect, the aid rationale, how to organize it. And honestly speaking, do we really expect that we would provide grants to high income countries? So why this focus? And the third aspect in this regard, public. I fully agree. We rely in many sectors, in many areas on public investments or public contributions, but we also understand, and this is part of the Addis Ababa thinking, it's part of the SDG thinking, that we need to have many partnerships, also with non-public actors. And why is this kind of thinking in this way a bit narrow from my perspective, and even a bit more narrow than a number of aid debates? So this would be, you know, just a subset of a couple of questions I would like to raise, and with respect to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And before you go, do you mind just introducing yourself? I should have asked you at the beginning. Which organization are you with?
I'm working for German Development Institute.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Melindo, please, as a member of the expert working group, you've given us a lot of contribution into the report. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I would like to respond to Stefan's question on investment. And I think that is a very important question, and that is necessary to be clarified at this point itself. When we were discussing at the expert working group, we were very clear that when we talk about GPI, it has got three components: global, public, and investment. There was a question also on the chat as to what do we mean by that. I am not going into the detail, but I would just like to emphasize on the issue of investment that Stefan raised. From a very classical technical perspective, investment is considered to be use of resources to increase the productivity and capacity to produce. And it need not, we have often fallen into a trap of considering that money is the only possible resource for investment. And if you have a look at the report in detail, you will find that we have talked about the issue of non-monetary resources also as a part of investment in global public investment, taking cue from what has been done by many developing countries in the world. So the idea behind GPI is that we will gather resources not just in monetary terms, but also in non-monetary terms as well. But the fundamental idea is to increase the productive capacity of people, and that's why, and that is to be done not from a private profit motive, but from the motive of increasing the global welfare. And that is why we are calling it global public investment. And investment, of course, has got both these components considered in the idea of GPI. I hope I have been able to give some answers to what Stefan raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melindo. And we've got a huge amount of comments and questions in the chat, and a lot of them around meaningful participation. And I see that we've still got Michael from Global Systems on the line, and anyone else that's involved in supporting citizens' engagement. It'd be really good to hear some of your ideas of how you think the consultation can and should be done to ensure the voice of a broad range of citizens is included. And then I also see a couple of questions around youth. and the importance of engaging young people. And I'm wondering, Rosanna, if you're on the line still, if you could say anything. Restless Development has a lot of experience of supporting youth engagement. So I'm shouting out some names there, and please feel free to jump in. We have literally got 2-3 minutes before we need to start closing up. And then that's great. And then Christoph, I also see on the line, and also Chris Collins, two of you that have also been on the journey of helping to co-create GPI to this point. Any reflections from the group, or any answers to there? And if not, they were Adolf. Great to have your hand up. Yes, please come in.
Yes, hello, or good afternoon, or what time of the day you ever have. I was just picking up the last consultation and last comments on the software, so to speak, of GPI, and I indeed think this is something that should be looked at much more closely. The software not only relates to the governance, but also to the reciprocity of these processes. I think colleagues have highlighted that we have gone beyond the times where one part of the world has the problems and the other has the solutions. And how to ensure that GPI establishes mechanisms that also impact richer countries, not only in the traditional way of development coherence for sustainable development, but also giving GPI an operational role in high-income countries. Because that was changed, the whole endeavor. For now, we see a World Bank or UNDP only investing in the poorer parts of the world and not being present in the richer ones. That means that the institutions is in a way separated from the knowledge production, the know-how, and the circular learning processes that would be created if countries of all times of income level would be involved. And we have some of these already universally conceived international organizations like the IMF, not a very happy example, but it is a universal organization. And we have some other instruments, in particular related also to health. And I think that is something that is very necessary, and that could also highlight what Board said at the very beginning, this enlightened self-interest. So people in the higher middle income and in the higher income countries would actually see a role of these instruments to their own societies. Thank you.
Adolf, thank you so much. Our time is up. It's always so difficult to cover such a huge topic in such a short period of time. And before I hand over to Alicia for final comments, a reminder that once we've closed, we will keep the Zoom open for an informal drinks and chat. I'd like to just extend my thank you to the expert working group and all the panelists for all your support, guidance, and co-creation of where we've got to on the journey so far. And I can't go without thanking the awesome team, Simon, and all of the Equal International colleagues that have got us to this point with all of that guidance. So a huge thanks from me, and over to you, Alicia, to give us to officially close and some closing comments.
Thanks very much, Anton. It's very hard to close after everything that's been said. I just want to pick up on a few different points in a somewhat disorganized fashion. The first maybe is the last point that Adolf said about the enlightened self-interest. I mean, I think it's hard to envision a better example of self-defeating behavior than COVID-19 and the clinging to corporate pharmaceutical monopolies' interests that does not benefit the people in the United States or the global North, just as it is decimating people in the global South. So I think there are real opportunities to use COVID-19 as an inflection point. we also see in this crisis in the development of the research of these life-saving vaccines, that required years and billions of dollars of public funding, say, from my government, the National Institutes of Health, but then global public investment through CEPI and otherwise. And that worked. That brought us these miraculous vaccines and should be celebrated. What we are now seeing is the failure, the lack of global public investment in nationalistic corporate monopolies that won't provide, that are enforcing vaccine apartheid. So the difference is very stark and clear, and this needs to be a turning point. We've known for a very long time that the aid system is broken, but I am hopeful that we cannot come out of this sweeping global catastrophe going back to any kind of business as usual in international development. I want to make a point to Francisco's reference to the Global Fund, because actually in the United States, at Partners in Health and a number of coalition partners around Friends of the Global Fund very much believe that replenishment of the Global Fund to strengthen resilient health systems around the world is the way to go, as opposed to siloized pandemic preparedness funds. And we're actively working on that and actively using the concept of GPI in that fashion. And I would welcome your insights at any point as to that. So I would just, I guess, close this wonderful launch event, reiterating that we want all of your inputs. The consultation process can take many different forms, and I would hope that it would get to youth, that this is a topic for youth in high schools and colleges and communities to talk about, because it is their future above all, even if it's not in the technical terms. It has to be something that is understood at a visceral level, as well as being technically accurate and robust and sound. And it's urgent, because COVID has, there is a moral stain on the world from what we are seeing unfold before our eyes, and we need to change course desperately. So I'm just delighted to be part of this group, and I would invite everybody to join us and make it better.